We're going to talk about COVID-19 vaccine today. And I will tell you, yes, I know there's a lot of people that feel very strongly against vaccines. Sure, the purpose of this video is going to be to help people understand the allergic reactions, the side effects that you can get from the vaccine. Now, if your goal is to bomb and hate on the show and just do that, we'll probably ignore most of your comments. So just be aware. If you have serious questions and concerns, we'll deal with as many as we can. But first of all, we're going to start with some other content, and then we'll get into the information about the COVID-19 vaccines. Other content that we've covered, we have on the show, type 2 diabetes reversed with a low-carb diet. This channel's all about science. This is not opinions. This is articles that have demonstrated this. We cover those articles. We covered the articles about the new coronavirus strain. There's more information coming out about that. We talked about genetics in COVID. There do appear to be some, there's a thing called a GWAS study, genome-wide association study, where you look at the specific genes in an entire genome, and you find out what genes are at risk. Because yes, age appears to be by far the biggest risk for COVID-19 if you get this coronavirus infection, but there are some unique, young, healthy people that go into COVID too, the serious disease. What is it? Is there something genetic about these folks that they have a little bit more risk? That's an important issue that we're beginning to find out information on it, and that's covered in that video. The USDA and Department of Agriculture and the Food and Drug Administration came out with new food guidelines. It was a disaster. It's not a disaster, but it's not much better than it has been. And we covered that and covered why. I'll go into a couple of other things. If you have an interest in your health, longevity, living a long, healthy life, you need to make sure that you don't have prediabetes or full-blown diabetes. If you look at our practice, the medical practice side of what we do, that's really what we work with all day, every day. What we used to think was normal, quote, normal aging, that middle-aged bulge, even erectile dysfunction, these things appear to be very much associated with prediabetes. 90% of people that have prediabetes don't know it. There are no symptoms. You hear about symptoms like thirst and weight loss. You see that with some folks with significant, unusual diabetes, but that's not what's doing the damage. That's doing a little bit of damage for very few people. As a population, we're getting damaged mostly by milder, moderate cases of prediabetes. You need to find out if you've got that, and we've got ways of helping you to do that. We're going to slip over into a piece of information about the variants and the COVID vaccines. There were two small, new, not yet peer-reviewed studies that suggest there are some variants that may pose unexpected challenges to the immune system. Study number 1, the South Africa variant is less susceptible to antibodies created by natural infection and by vaccines by Pfizer and Moderna. So if that were significantly true, you could worry about reinfection. Serum samples from 21 of 44 COVID-19 survivors did not destroy the South Africa variant. However, don't panic. Look at the rest of the information. Higher levels of neutralizing antibodies are found in successful samples than levels found in mildly ill patients. So this is not a complete bypass of the immune system. be aware of that. Study number 2, and there's more information about this issue. Study number 2, researchers tested samples from 14 people who received the Moderna vaccine and 6 people who received the Pfizer vaccine. There is a slight decrease in antibody activity directed against engineered viruses containing 3 key mutations of the South Africa variant. Again, don't panic. Listen to the rest of the information. Still, even if antibody effectiveness were reduced tenfold, the vaccines would still be quite effective against the virus. That's according to Jesse Bloom, an evolutionary biologist based in Seattle. So what he does is he studies things like viruses as they evolve when they're passing through the human population. His perspective is, yeah, there's some bypass, there's some decrease with the vaccine, but it's not a practical consideration. You could cut that response by a factor of 10 and the vaccine would still work. The vaccines and natural infection also lead to production of thousands of other types of antibodies, various immune cells, things that retain the memory of that virus. There are other components. They may be enough to prevent serious illness, says Florian Kramer, an immunologist at Mount Sinai in New York. So it's not just antibodies. The immune system is a symphony orchestra. And yes, you can get rid of the tubas, but you still got the bass drum, you got the violins, you know where I'm going. In a press release, Moderna CEO Stephanie Bancel said, Moderna's vaccine should be protective against these newly detected variants. But that's not all. They're working on a booster shot against the South African variant out of an abundance of caution. And you can expect that with any of the vaccines that become authorized for use. The Pfizer vaccine was also found to be effective against the UK variant. However, the Pfizer vaccine has not announced test results against the South Africa variant. So I'm going to go straight on into the program, and then you can do the water ball a little bit later as we get into questions and answers. The major part of the program today is allergic reactions to the COVID-19 vaccines. Yes, there are reactions. Yes, there have been some serious reactions. But again, get the facts before you make a decision not to take this vaccine. I've got a couple of people in my family, for example. One is a person who's got severe food allergies, tree nut allergies. The other is a person who's had significant allergies to vaccines before. The first one was really not that much of a conversation. He understood, and he took his AVQ. It's like EpiPen. He'll take that with him when he goes to get his vaccination. The other one, again, was a little bit dicier. It's a family member that's had problems with tetanus vaccines in the past. We looked it up. We focused on that for a little bit. I researched a few things about it, and you'll see why that was more of a concern. At the end of the day, she didn't have an EpiPen, an AVQ, but we ordered her one, and she's going to go ahead and get the vaccine. Now, here's the focus on those vaccine reactions. In vaccine trials, Pfizer and Moderna excluded participants with a history of an allergic reaction to any components of the COVID vaccine. Pfizer also excluded participants with a history of severe allergy associated with any vaccine. So that's the second family member that I was just talking about. On December 11th, the FDA issued an EUA emergency use authorization for Pfizer, the Pfizer vaccine. On December 14th, general vaccination of healthcare started. On December 15th, one day later, a 32-year-old female healthcare worker in Alaska who had known allergies presented with an anaphylactic reaction within 10 minutes after the first dose. Severe cases of anaphylaxis have been reported in the U.S. after vaccinating 2 million healthcare workers. The CDC has then recommended the exclusion of any person who has a history of a severe or immediate allergic reaction associated with any of the vaccine components. And that, if you go back to my original story about my family member, that was the difference. It's not somebody with immediate or severe reactions to any vaccine. It's the vaccine components of this vaccine. And there's a specific group of, there's a specific chemical that we'll talk about in just a second that appears to be the agent that's causing this, the offending agent. It's called, here's the technical name, polyethylene glycol, or PEG for short, P-E-G. So let's talk a little bit more about that. If you're wondering, again, where some of this information is coming from, this was an article in the review article in the New England Journal very recently, just over the past week, about this topic. Now, what is anaphylaxis? Anaphylaxis is a severe reaction. It can kill you. There are no permanent problems with it if you are saved getting through that. And the way to save a patient that has that problem is fairly simple. Epinephrine. That's why we talked about having that EpiPen or AviQ available for both of these individuals. What's the problem? What does it cause? Well, it's a serious multi-system reaction. It's got rapid onset. You start getting this flushing, your skin turns red. You get laryngeal edema. That means the larynx, the major airway to your lungs, can close up as it swells. That's what causes the immediate life-threatening component. Most everything else, hypotension, low blood pressure, that can cause a little bit of a serious problem. Cardiovascular collapse, those occasionally can cause the problem, but the big problem with anaphylaxis is closing the airway. Epinephrine opens it right back up. Again, you get other things, wheezing, nausea, vomiting, fast heartbeat. So again, but the big issue is closing that airway. The cause is activation of mast cells, part of the immune system, through the antigen binding and cross-linking with one of the immunoglobulin families, IgE, or antibody family, IgE. This requires prompt attention and treatment with epinephrine to halt the rapid progression of the life-threatening symptoms. Anaphylaxis is a treatable condition with no permanent effects. Nevertheless, news of allergic reactions have raised fear about the risks of the new COVID vaccine. Acute allergic reactions are caused by an antigen, the dead or weakened bacteria, the foreign body, that's what antigen means, or excipient. Now, excipient, I mentioned a few minutes ago that I was going to talk about what the chemical was in there. Again, that polyethylene glycol. First of all, what is an excipient anyway? So before we cover excipients, let's talk about anaphylaxis with previous vaccines. Historically, anaphylaxis with previous vaccines has been more associated with the inactivated components like egg, the gelatin, latex. You know, we used to make vaccines by inoculating eggs with the virus. The virus would go through, make a bunch of the antigen that we wanted. So you had gelatin in there, you had latex in there, you had most of all egg products. So people with egg allergies couldn't take those vaccines. Now this is more of an excipient. What's that? An excipient is it's another ingredient found in very small amounts in a vaccine. Excipients are often preservatives. James and I were talking about this, the reactions a couple of months ago, and I was thinking, what is that preservative that is often related to vaccine anaphylaxis? Thimerosal was the preservative I was trying to think of. And again, thimerosal is not the problem with the COVID vaccine. It's PEG. Adjuvants. Now, what's an adjuvant? An adjuvant is a small amount of a chemical that inflates or magnifies the immune response to to the antigen, to the foreign body. Aluminum salts are an example. And if you've taken the new herpes virus vaccine, the one for older individuals, that one has a lot of adjuvants. That's why people tend to get sicker with that vaccine. Stabilizers. Now, stabilizers will keep the vaccine potent during transportation and storage. For example, sugars or gelatins. Cell culture materials used to grow the vaccine antigens, like I talked about, the egg protein, and ingredients used to kill viruses or inactivate toxins, for example, formaldehyde. So those are the sort of things that you'll see as excipients. You're going to find some of those in there still after the production method. Pfizer and Moderna vaccines use a lipid or fat or / oil-based nanoparticle, meaning a very tiny particle, a little bit lower than, smaller than microscopic. It's a particle carrier system to prevent the rapid degradation of the messenger RNA and facilitate in vitro delivery. This system's further stabilized by a PEG 2000 lipid conjugate. Now, wait a minute. Let's break that down. What does that mean? PEG, again, is polyethylene glycol. Now, never heard of that? It's all over, and there are tons of things that most of us are routinely exposed to, a lot of household products that include polyethylene glycols. They're used as thickeners, softeners, moisture-carrying agents, penetration enhancers, surfactants. We won't go into definitions on that. Widespread in household products, from skincare to cosmetics to baby wipes to cleaners. PEGs were long thought to be biologically inert, but there are some pieces of evidence that suggest that maybe not so alert and not so inert. Health concerns for PEG. Contamination of ethylene oxide and 1,4-dioxane. Both have some carcinogenic or cancer-causing components. Both compounds are not intentionally added as ingredients to any of these household products. I'm actually, if you look at this slide is mostly talking about polyethylene glycol. It's not so much talking about the COVID-19 vaccines. It's talking about PEG in use in things like Miralax. PEGs are penetration enhancers. When PEGs are in formulations containing toxic ingredients, those ingredients could penetrate the skin more readily. In a 2016 study, as much as 72% have some antibodies to PEGs, presumably as a result of exposure through cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, etc. And about 7% have a high enough level to trigger potential anaphylaxis reactions. So those are the folks that we worry about in terms of these vaccines. PEG is used as an excipient in medications, including the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. It's been implicated in a rare hidden danger cause of IgE-mediated reactions and recurrent anaphylaxis. The risk of sensitization appears to be higher with the higher molecular weight PEGs. You know, PEGs are a classification of different types of molecules. The higher, the bigger the molecular weight, the more likely there appears to be some ability to sensitize. Anaphylaxis has been associated with bowel prep containing PEG 3350 to PEG 4000. It's been noted in case reports. Again, it's not been seen with much regularity. It's just case reports. For drugs with PEG 3350 like methylprednisolone or injectable steroids, it appears that the PEG component is more likely than the active drug to be the cause of the anaphylaxis. And again, steroids are usually given to reverse anaphylaxis. A patient developed anaphylaxis when first exposed to a PEG lip 5000 ECG contrast, which is labeled with a warning about immediate hypersensitivity reactions. While there were already reports of anaphylaxis with the Pfizer vaccine, the risk of anaphylaxis with the Moderna vaccine is still not well. It's still been rare enough to not have a good number on it yet. Both Pfizer and Moderna vaccines use PEG 2000, but the two vaccines have different mixtures on this. Implications for vaccines with adenovirus and protein subunits, which is commonly based on polysorbate 80, are currently unknown. Polysorbate 80 and PEG have a similar structure. And again, those are vaccines that are coming down the pike, haven't been authorized yet, but they have a slightly different set of excipients. So, what to do? Here's the thing. I go back to the discussions I had with my own family members that had allergies. First of all, for all of us, understanding these issues is important in terms of deciding about the vaccine. You know, at the end of the day, there's some pick your poison component to this. If there were no such thing as coronavirus, why get the vaccine? You wouldn't need to. But there is a coronavirus out there. And here's the thing. Over the next few months, I don't know if it's 6 months or 18 months, but there are going to be very few people that don't get exposure to that spike protein on the outside of the coronavirus. Now, here's where the pick your poison comes in. When you get your exposure to that spike protein, do you want it to be associated with live virus, or do you want it to be associated with the vaccine? That's your choice. So I'll tell you what, today, why don't we skip over the video and go ahead, give us the water ball. We'll go straight into Q&A. So James told me that we were going to have Dr. David Vigorous on. He appeared with us in the past, last week or the week before. He got called away by the FDA for an EUA discussion with one of the things he's working with. So he did arm James with some information. So James was saying if he sounded very smart today, and during those episodes, it might be coming from Dr. Vigorous. James, any comments?
I can't believe you outed me.
Do
you know how much I practiced repeating and trying to look serious when I said it? You know, the sulfate mechanism that occurs in the memory of T cells often is a reaction to the innate immune response that we have from multiple mechanisms within the human body. And now it's totally wasted, totally wasted.
Totally sold you down the river. You just got to be careful what you tell me.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you know, I hope you won't repeat everything. That's my position. Let's just leave it at that, you know. Good morning. Great job. Very interesting topic. And I will tell you that along this line, there is a lot of fear, and there is because the headlines, again, you know, I bring a different perspective. I'm very pro, just for people who know that I put a little humor in there, but I'm very pro getting the vaccine. I am at the second level. You're a 1B, I'm a 2A or a 2B. And when that time comes, yes, I will be getting the vaccine. But I do read and listen and hear what people's concerns are regarding vaccines in general, and this one in specifics. But there are some disturbing misinformation that is out there regarding vaccines and regarding this vaccine. And that is, I was speaking with one nursing home facility just recently, and about 30% of their staff is refusing the vaccine because of fear that they have that they're going to have some type of anaphylactic reaction or something adverse. And they almost always, it's some anecdotal story of, I know someone who is in the know and they tell me this information. And so as I began exploring that, more around the healthcare world, I found that there actually is a deeper conspiratorial mindset that I joke, you and I know we have a little humor and, but we take it serious. But no, there really is some issues we need to address to give people, particularly those on the front end, 1As and 1Bs, that you need to really consider and look into this, take it serious, because this is your life. This isn't just in theory. This is facilities that have patients who are dying, staff who are dying, who now have an opportunity to address those concerns with the vaccine. And they're more scared of the vaccine than they are of the virus. And it's as if they're standing in a graveyard of bodies laying all over the place and worrying about, whether they're going to get struck by lightning, which is rare. So it's a great timely topic and something that you did a great job in laying out.
Well, thank you much. The first couple of comments that I saw had to do with folks frustrated that the vaccine was not ready for them, or even more so their family members in their 80s and 90s. Minnesota, for example. Here's Travis Barber, 87-year-old father, previous triple bypass, stroke with full recovery, valve replacement, lives in senior facility in Dallas, still waiting on vaccine.
Right. That's just incredible that we're unable to do that. And one of the concerns, you chuckle or you laugh, but you go, okay, let's really address this. And that is that in the vaccine supposedly are tracking devices, this New World Order thing, that there's going to be tracking devices, and that this is all a conspiracy so that we can be tracked. And I got two responses to that. Number one, we're all toting these things wherever we go. So if you're worried about a tracking device, you kind of have one of those attached to you. Secondly, there's a little humor, but we spend $750 billion a year in our military, but yet we couldn't stop Duck Dynasty and some guys in deerskin bikinis from penetrating and taking over the United States Capitol. So if we think somehow there's a global conspiracy that's going to track 330 million Americans and somehow move us, and I have my political opinions as well, but it's just on the surface, it's not reasonable. What we do have is a virus that really has killed over 400,000. And I think T-Bone makes that point in our comments later. There's no deaths associated that we know. There's been some responses, but very limited deaths relative to the people who are dead from not taking a vaccine, from not being prepared for it.
No question. Again, it gets back to my old phrase about pick your poison. Do you really think that you're going to get exposed to this protein, this spike protein, one way or another? Right. Do you really think there's been enough ability to create people don't get along? How many people are going to be able? Can you imagine the teamwork required to create some sort of silly chip that you're going to insert with a vaccine? So I know I do believe in some conspiracy theories, but this is not one of them.
Well, BCG, just you can go to the CDC, and if you don't believe those, you can, there's other sites that you can find data. So BCG vaccine it's probably the one that has the worst negative response, and it's somewhere, I think, 1 in 500,000. DPT is 1 in 1 to 2 million. So even if we're on those rates, 1 in a million deaths per vaccine, it's a vaccine that kills. I mean, it's a disease that kills about 1 in 1,000, right? To get,
I'll take 1 in a million in a heartbeat.
Right. You take those odds. So 1 in 1,000 are going to die, 1 in a million. And I think we're going to find in this anaphylaxis, you can prepare for that, which is ask if you're going to get the shot, then ask, do you have an EpiPen, or does the doctor who's prescribing that have an EpiPen? Call ahead, say, I'm going to get the shot. Do you guys have an EpiPen or something deal if I have an allergic reaction? Say no, wait, find a place and get one, and then be prepared if you have that reaction. As far as long-term effects, well, people said, well, I'm afraid what it's going to do long term. We know what the long term effects will be of the COVID vaccine, in spite of the fact that I'll agree that there's a lot of things that have been blown up and a lot of politics around the disease. We can't deny that there is a disease that's killed 430,000 Americans, mostly older, mostly people with underlying conditions, but it's killed more people per capita without those underlying conditions or known underlying conditions than the risk is of the vaccine. And you can take something like an EpiPen, you can take something and be prepared for the response if you have it. And the odds are just so far in your favor versus getting the protein, being exposed to a live virus and potentially having long-term effects of lung disease and COPD and other issues that we understand exactly what all is going to happen 5 years, 2 years, 6 years from now when the effects of COVID is studied.
So to your point about EpiPen, I had my first dose last week. I could have gotten it a couple of weeks earlier, but I had this thought about, maybe there are other people that clearly need it more than I do. I live in Lexington. Lexington is like number 17 in terms of the states already getting that vaccine out there. Kentucky is. Kentucky's done a really good job. And as I looked, I found something that supported what I had been reading. For many of us, saying, okay, I'm going to wait for others really didn't matter because there were vaccines slots going unused. Anyhow, that's a different issue.
Yeah.
The issue about the EpiPen, when I went up there were more emergency transport trucks. There were more EMTs, and every one of them had their EpiPen out ready to. It's like you're walking into a dart factory or something. I don't see, even though I've got a couple of family members who I'm advising to take the EpiPen, internally I'm knowing they're not going to get a chance to pull that out of their pocket before there's a gazillion EpiPens waiting for them.
Get 3 or 4 shots. Well, one of the questions later that we can address is brought up. It's a good point. A little bit later down in here, I forget who brought it. Yes, Travis Barber brings up the EpiPens have some potential side effects for tachycardia, atrial fibrillation patients. So that's true, that's real. But again, it would only be used in a case where you're at the point of you live or die. So again, it's a trade-off. I mean, it's a rare occurrence. So one in whatever thousand that you have that effect. And in that moment, I'll let you speak to it. You're trying to save a person's life and can deal with the other problem.
Right. So, I use the imagery. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I use the imagery of a whole bunch of people standing there with a needle getting ready to jab you. And you are saying, you get hit multiple times. A, that's not going to happen. And B, to clarify, you wait until people have significant symptoms with this. Correct. It's scary because you start to feel your throat closing up. And when you do that, that's when you do the EpiPen. Sometimes you can go a little bit quicker, especially in a young, healthy person that doesn't have any cardiovascular problems. Right. Quite often. In fact, for every person who starts to have this closing of the airways, you'll get hundreds of people who just get itchy skin. They don't get any of the airway stuff.
Right.
So, and for those folks, there's some question, it's not always just getting hit immediately with EpiPen.
Right.
Madova, I don't know. I read this, I see whole evil in caps, the already corrupted, misleading media in caps. To me, I have to tell you, I'm not sure that that's a question I can respond to. My BJJ, thanks for attending, BJJ. I don't mean to out you, but again, you have mentioned on this channel, I think, that you're doing a lot of LP(a) work and maybe having a group, maybe getting some momentum set up and started in terms of making people aware of LP(a). LP(a) it's a form of LDL. The quote, what people call bad cholesterol. It's not really bad cholesterol. That's an outdated term. Don't use it. But a type of LP(a), I mean, a type of that LDL is LP(a) that we do know carries extra cardiovascular risk. Docs don't look for it. Labs don't even tend to test for it. And my BJJ is doing some work to move that ahead. Any comments on that, James, before we go back to?
It's a truism. Keep up the good work, Chuck.
Thank you, Bart. Yep, the vaccine hater. If you're going to just try to troll the channel, the show today, we're not going to respond to that.
But we're happy they're watching.
Yes.
We hope we educate you. Make comments if later there's someone challenging that says there's been lots of deaths from the vaccine. Hit the don't like button. That's acceptable to us. If you don't like it, that's okay. We are a science channel. Dr. Brewer does a great job with his team, Chris and others, preparing for these shows and doing the research and reading and getting data and presenting data. And we're perfectly happy in either email form or to put up a little bit of the data here for those concerns. So we're meaningful. We take it all serious. We actually Dr. Brewer is one of the most open-minded physicians you're going to ever meet on planet Earth. He's naturally a Missouri kind of guy. Show me, give me the data, give me the facts. I'll review it. We'll look at it. We'll get it in front of his eyes to see. And we've got great network of experts who are some of the best science and medical minds in the world that we interact and talk to. And these discussions occur. I mean, they're behind the scenes. We're looking for what is the best solution, best answer. But just, it's got to have some evidence of fact to it. And so we do. We want to hear it. We want to hear your thoughts on it. But you got to put, just put facts up there, please. If you don't like it, that helps us too. But we want you to listen. We just want you to listen with open mind and good conversation that this channel is intended to create.
To James's point, we developed a network of consultants. Dr. Vigorous from Vanderbilt is one. Stefanos Kalis at Harvard is another. Who are a couple of the other folks?
Mason Harrell from the U.S. Navy.
Mason Harrell from Harvard and the U.S. Navy.
Scott at University of Kentucky.
James has a relationship with a group. It's a nationally known global investment group, and we did some consultation for that group in the beginning of the COVID shutdown to help these companies and their client companies understand how to do this. And so we're looking at bringing that consulting, the horsepower that consulting group brings back to the channel where appropriate. Your Aunt Martha's here, James.
Howdy, Aunt Martha.
Go over this process. Once the body has used all the available glucose as energy, what is the process to pull out fat to conserve to usable energy? Well, actually, Aunt Martha, I will say a couple of points. That's, if you haven't read the book, Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It by Gary Taubes, it's a great book. There's another book which is similar called Good Calories, Bad Calories, but Good Calories, Bad Calories is almost the same book with just 300 more pages, also by Gary Taubes. And if you really want more of a Reader's Digest version than either one of those, you can go to I think it was a New York Times article that started that whole thing for Gary Taubes. And I think it was Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It. I think that was the title of the article. Basically what he says is, and it's a good point, that middle-aged spread, that middle-aged fat that we start putting on. Most people think we start gaining fat because we're eating more. His perspective, and once you start looking at things like insulin and insulin resistance, the reality is probably something more like this. We start eating more because we're getting fat, and we're getting fat because of our insulin resistance. And our insulin resistance is causing our insulin to go up. Insulin keeps us from burning fat. So I don't know if we want to go any further into that concept, James. From my perspective,
No, that's great. That's a great point. And so when you solve that issue, the insulin resistance issue, your diet changes, recognizing you to eat to the glucometer, which she did last week. She said she got the glucometer and the CGM and started living according to it. She asked a question, and that you'll see now, I think you have up, are we, that's a whole different topic. Once you start burning that brown fat, I guess is how it's described, is there any issues with that? I'll let you address that. But we are creating a course around this as well. So that course will be available in the near future. There was actually some early this morning charts we were building. So that we'll address this at a future time, but you might want to look at that question and talk about the fat burn, because once you do make insulin effective, or you unplug the mechanism of insulin resistance, your body gets its energy from that fat. So you can address it more, but that's the magic of losing weight.
Well, as you said, I do tend to be from Missouri. I do want to see real evidence. And here's the thing. This is the stuff that I do all day, every day with patients. You hear that concept. This chemical, this bad bioindicator, this bad thing, all is stored by fat. So if I burn fat, it's going to come back out in my body and cause more damage. I have yet to see anyone who got in more damage from burning fat than
the fat itself.
Than the fat itself.
Right.
Fat causes insulin resistance, and that causes more death, disease, and disability than anything that's happened in modern history, including the coronavirus epidemic or pandemic.
I'll tell an anecdotal story. Someone I know very close, I won't go into who, but someone that I had dinner with last night has lost in about 6 or 7 months 110 pounds.
Wow.
And obviously that was all fat. And they were at a point of liver failure. I mean, saying you're going to die, you've got liver failure. And of course, soon after that will come kidney failure if you live that long. And their liver functions, their bilirubins, ALT, the ASTs, they all improve significantly. The kidney functions improve significantly. And my point, not being the doctor, but if burning that much fat was going to create a toxicity, you would see it in the liver. That would show up in your liver functions, but those liver functions are improving. So if you want to show me, as you lose weight and you go to the lab, look at your bilirubin, look at your AST, look at your ALT, look at those liver function tests, and you will probably see that those numbers are improving. And then that's just proof in the pudding.
It's a good point. Back to the vaccine reactions. My BJJ says he's got an EMT friend that's evidently either driving or riding in one of those many trucks that were taking up parking lot spaces at the vaccine site. He said he's treated many individuals with adverse reactions to the vaccine. About 50% of the time, it just ends up being anxiety where the patient starts hyperventilating. That's true. And here's another thing I can tell you is, I used to be an ER doc for many years. One of the temptations for the provider, when you see somebody, you see them hyperventilating and you say, oh, well, that's just hyperventilation. No, think about it. And all you have to do is have one of these patients go bad, and you'll learn that forever. And that is the feelings that you get with anaphylaxis, the dizziness, the rapid heartbeat, the burning skin, and especially if you feel your throat starting to close, that creates anxiety too. So the first thing that a provider like this, or an EMT or a doc, has to do is make sure that anxiety, that hyperventilation, is not being caused by an underlying anaphylaxis. Thanks for sharing that. Aunt Martha again. Husband's allergic to aspirin and Tylenol. Causes scalp to itch and sometimes a rash on the head, neck itself. Now, is that enough to have concern for taking the vaccine? No. Thank you very much, T-Bone. A super chat, $4.99. Kudos to the VA. They called me. First Pfizer vaccine done. Second scheduled for February 5th. Congratulations to you. Travis, so EpiPen potentially dangerous for tachycardia or atrial fib patients? I am an atrial fib patient. The answer is yes. I think we covered it. There is some concern there, but usually that's usually not a significant concern. There are some patients, but not a lot, that outweighs. That's just something that the provider needs to, the EMT needs to be considering. Number of deaths from taking a virus? None. Did you mean vaccine? Number of deaths associated with not taking, oh yeah, okay. None with not taking the vaccine, 430,000 and growing, absolutely. And isn't that just in the US?
Correct.
So, James, you've had a little more chance to read some of that. Have you seen any other comments?
Oh, no, we're getting lots of comments this morning. We have to move to get through all of them because there's lots of them. So,
any specific ones we need to pull up?
No. I think just running through them, you'll see there's a few doubters, but most of them's really good comments. Blue Devil, I think this comment, he's being humorous when I held up the phone and making the point that I think the point he's making is the vaccine, the response to the vaccines because you're taking the vaccine, and so it's a subtle, but I get the point and a good point, funny point. Goldie Girl, you're going to get down a little bit. Goldie Girl says there's been lots of deaths from the vaccine. You might want to talk about causation versus correlation. I think a lot of people raise, Hank Aaron died 2 weeks after he got the vaccine. Therefore, at 86, it must have been the vaccine. There's correlation, there's causation. I don't think there's any evidence that some of these deaths,
Yeah,
people went to work, they died on their way home from work. That's why you shouldn't go to work. Wait a minute. That's, difference.
Yeah, it's still too early to have a lot of clarity. Let me give you an example. There's that obstetrician, that young obstetrician that died recently, and it was a week or two after getting the vaccine. When you go in and look, it appears to be due to a clotting mechanism and a stroke. Now, was that due to the vaccine? Was that did he get infected with it about the time that he got the vaccine? I don't think they're going to know that kind of stuff yet. Even if they do, it gets me back to the numbers above. I think it's really clear. There's no pattern of significant deaths at this point that we're able to see. There is a significant pattern of anaphylaxis. It's uncommon, and like James mentioned earlier, it's less common than you see with a lot of our other vaccines. So, so far it's looking pretty good. John Tocho's awaiting the vaccine anxiously. I know I know how you feel. It's a major. I'll tell you this: once you do get that vaccine, it is what a feeling. It is a major relief. What happened to pneumonia and the flu? I don't know. Studies are out on the benefits of cod liver oil mitigation in the virus storm. Well, that's interesting. What long-term problems? We'll see lab rats survive in the months and years ahead. Sources of the cod liver. I would agree. I'd love to see the sources on the cod liver oil studies. There's, isn't vitamin D, isn't cod liver oil a major source of vitamin D? Somebody fact check me on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd laughing when I see that. How many of us growing up, cod liver oil, there's about 3 drugs. We should do a study on the 3 or 4 things that our parents stuck in us every time we got remotely sick. And what was the stuff that was out of the boiled in hell that you poured on every cut that you had that was red and orange and stained everything? But so you poured that on any scrape or cut, and you stuck cod liver oil in you for any kind of sickness. And maybe the reason some of us survive is because of all that strange stuff our parents used in the 1950s, 60s to cure us, you know.
Well, there's actually a lot to be said for that. That goes down that path of finding out that allergies and asthma and some of the other allergic problems may be becoming more prevalent. And there were significant theories. Now there's more evidence that very well may be true. I mean, if your child grows up eating nothing but McDonald's and Mott's applesauce, he or she's really not getting much exposure to a lot of things that are in food. And if their first exposure to tree nuts, for example, is when they're 11 or 12 years old, maybe you're creating significant risk for a tree nut allergy. While you were talking, I did look it up. Yes, it's cod liver oil, one of the major food sources for vitamin D. There's been tons and tons of information developed already about vitamin D. So cod liver oil outside of vitamin D, I don't know. I'd like to see that. How can the good doctor say we don't know what long-term effects of COVID are, but say he has confidence long-term in the vaccine when we don't have long-term data? Not sure that I understand your question, and I think I'm pretty sure that you're not understanding what I'm saying. There can be long-term effects from either one of these. I'm not saying that there are not.
What you're saying is we want to be alive to figure out what they are. I want to be alive to find out what my chronic disease will be as a result of it, as opposed to someone going, well, we sure miss James and Ford. They're dead.
Thank you, James. It's that kind of comment that routinely sort of gets me twisted around my axle, trying to put my logic back in a perspective that someone could understand when they're obviously not understanding my logic. So I won't dwell on that anymore. Skunk Ape, LP.
We've missed him for a couple of weeks. We've been looking for him. Glad to have
he's back. And he said, makes Mexican food taste great. Are you talking about, LP little A does?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Nancy Salvaggio, my cardiologist. What's that, James?
That's why we miss Skunk Ape. He always brings a great perspective. I don't know how you make Mexican food taste bad. It's delicious. It's healthy for you, kind of. The avocados are good for you.
Nancy Salvaggio, my cardiologist, this is a good topic. My cardiologist is sending me to a chelation specialist. Thoughts on chelation? Does it lower LP little a? Now, I will tell you this. Speaking of, again, being from Missouri, being a skeptic, I approached a lot of things. Chelation with skepticism. I approached a lot of supplements with skepticism. The supplements tended to win me over a lot better than the evidence for chelation. We've had a couple of videos where we went into the details. I will admit, just like most science, there is some conflicting evidence, but I am still not a fan and not a big believer in chelation. But let me just clarify something. Chelation for what? Now, there was at one point I was working for the state government when the state government in Maryland had an indoor firing range. When I was working at Toyota, we had an area that also had lead. It was part of the paint process. If people get too much exposure to lead, chelation clearly works. And there's a lot of stuff you have to do to go back and replace the minerals that you've taken out with chelation. Chelation, for those of you who don't know, is usually an IV process where you put medicines into the body that chelate. In other words, they take large or heavy metals out of the body, out of the bloodstream. Now, there's been a lot of focus on chelation for cardiovascular disease. Because we're working mostly with cardiovascular disease, heart attack and stroke prevention, that's where we get a lot of focus and questions. I'm just not seeing a whole lot yet about cardiovascular prevention for chelation. No question, if you've got lead toxicity, chelation is clearly an option, a consideration. Anything on any of that, James?
No, that's great. There's a couple more questions to it, but we're gonna delve into. We're gonna get some comments as you start scrolling down. We're gonna get some debates going on where you're challenged. So be prepared. Coming up are a few comments challenging.
Are you able to pull up the comments yourself, or is it just me?
No, I can read them. I can see them and read them, but
so which one should we go to?
There's a couple of them. It comes back up. I can summarize a few of them because I know we're running up against the clock. Again, someone brought up Hank Aaron and said Hank Aaron got the vaccine and he died. Yes, Hank Aaron also hit 700 home runs and he died. So do not hit 700 home runs. That stuff kills you, you know. And again, the point in science is there's causation and correlation. And we're not saying, Dr. Brewer, I put words in your mouth. You're not saying you don't know. You're not his doctor. You don't know what happened. The news media comes out and says Hank Aaron died and he just got the vaccine. Okay, he was 86 years old also, and he probably had breakfast that day. Did his breakfast kill him? Did he have conjugal relations with his wife, you know, and that killed him? I mean, we don't know exactly. And there may be, and it's time in science and doctor, we just go, look, we can only deal with what we know right now. And there's no evidence that we've seen from any studies that say that those kind of things are killing people. Someone else says, this woman in New Jersey does plaque, chelation for plaque and high calcium scores. No evidence of the benefit. So maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. There's another example of you're not saying yes or no. You just show me the evidence. We do have evidence that says changing your lifestyle, even your evidence is your own experience, changing your lifestyle, changing the food habits, changing your exercise habits, changing your breathing habits, reducing your blood pressure, certainly changes your plaque score, certainly changes your calcium score. And maybe chelation does. Somebody plug it in.
The evidence is at best conflicted in that area.
And if you scroll down, there's a great question from Martin Klingeld that says, what is better to eat and lower blood sugar or fast longer with a fasting blood sugar of 130? So definitely they have a problem with a fasting blood sugar of 130. So on a positive note, what would you recommend would be a diet regimen or a lifestyle regimen for someone with fasting blood sugar of 130?
That's a great question. Thank you so much, Martin, for sharing it. Before I respond to it, though, I have to respond to a couple of comments that James made. Evidently, there's a lot of comments about me saying that Hank Aaron's death was not due to vaccine. If I said that, I spoke in error. I don't know. The first time I heard that Hank Aaron died was about an hour ago from James. I don't know anything about that death. Number two, James made a comment about maybe it was from having sex in the morning. I do have an opinion about that, and I did want to share that. It's actually, I did a video on it once, and it's an important topic because it creates a lot of fear. The fear of, okay, I've got heart disease, I've got plaque. Is having sex going to cause risk for heart attack? That's related to, is going out and running going to cause risk for heart attack? And yes, there's been a lot of research, there's been a lot of evidence compiled on both of those issues. Despite what you may have heard from Jim Fixx, you know, he was the runner, very well-known runner who had a heart attack running and died. There does not appear to be evidence. In fact, there's plenty of evidence to the contrary. Having sex and exercise doesn't kill you, even if you got heart disease. So I see smiles. I expect a whole lot of people are smiling because
boy, everybody's waiting on me to take that and run with it. But boy, there's some self-control that I'm gonna have to place on making comments about that. But
exercise and Janice was telling me she was seeing a patient for some coaching the other day, and that patient had been told by his cardiologist he shouldn't exercise. And it's like, even people with full-blown heart failure need to be doing some level of exercise. That's what you can actually get improvements in heart failure. And one of the best ways to do it, just like with everything else in this space, making sure you lose all the body fat that you can lose, increase your muscle mass, and exercise. Mm-hmm. So anyway, Martin Klingeld, my fasting blood sugar is 130. What can I do to eat better and fast?
That was the question we were on, and we got off on sex and totally lost our way.
Yeah. The sex, I couldn't help it. The red flags went up when you mentioned sex. So blood sugar of 120, a fasting blood sugar of 125 or above is one of the classifications for full-blown diabetes. So the other major and most common classification cut point is 200. 200 at a peak postprandial. So after eating or after in a glucose challenge, if your blood sugar goes up over 200, you've got full-blown diabetes. And if your fasting glucose is over 125, you've got full-blown diabetes. Now, the reason I repeat that is it helps people understand the difference between prediabetes and diabetes is nothing but a number. What if your fasting blood sugar was 120, then people would say, oh, well, you don't have full-blown diabetes yet. That's not true. You've still got that same disease process. And unfortunately, over 90% of us that have that disease process don't know it. That's the tragedy. Why do you not know it? There are no symptoms. People talk about losing weight or being thirsty. That does happen with some cases of diabetes, advanced diabetes, but the vast majority of us have no symptoms. Another reason is our broken healthcare system. The typical visit, for the patient, you get up, you schedule your day off, you drive in, you wait in the waiting room to see the doc, and you're in there with the doc for less than 7 minutes. And most of that 7-minute time, the doc's not listening to you anyway. That system's broken. And here's the third thing. Evidence from Hopkins and plenty of other places is really clear. Most doctors don't know how to diagnose this problem. And because they don't know how to manage the problem either. So we've got to change stuff about how we manage this problem. And that's why this channel's getting more and more subscribers. That's what we do for a living. James, any more comments about that before we get into Martin Klingeld's?
No, just what would you recommend? What do you typically recommend? Which I say to Martin, you've got lots of videos you can watch from Ford on this topic, but and we're going to do one coming up soon about my own journey and experience in this. But go ahead.
So I've got tons and tons of full-blown diabetics in my practice. It's rare. Most of them do not get significant blood sugars. They don't go over 200. They don't routinely go over 130 for fasting. Some get closer to that. Some have that dawn effect, but dawn effect and a blood sugar of 130 by itself is really not going to cause that much damage. It's these postprandial numbers getting above 140, 150, 180, and staying there hour after hour after hour. That's what causes cardiovascular inflammation. That's what causes risk for heart attack, stroke, dementia. So I'm not too worried about the fasting blood sugar usually. In fact, I'm mostly just trying to talk people out of being concerned over it. Regarding the postprandial, getting up to the post-meal, problems. The 160, 180. Very few of my full-blown diabetics ever have that problem. And here's why. It's a very simple concept. Carbs make that happen. If you don't eat carbs, your blood sugar is not going to go up. And so you cut the carbs in your diet, your blood sugars are going to drop. Very simple, very easy. Well, it's easy to wrap your head around. It's not quite so easy to go low carb. It's easier than most people think. It's wrapping your head around it is a problem, though. It's taken until this past year for the American Diabetes Association to start talking about a low carb diet.
But proactively, you would say finding foods, you talk about your own experience, was increasing salmon. You ate a lot more salmon, fish, walnuts, avocados, boiled eggs. So there are some very specific higher fat but healthy fat content type food that you substitute, and you take out, like I took out, all sugary drinks, gave up all soda pops, milkshakes, milk itself, and went to water and coffee, tea, unsweetened tea, took out dessert and took out snacking. You know, I tried everything, and including that, well, you need a bunch of meals during the day. And I found that's just the opposite. I took on fasting. So I'm a 16-hour is my regular fast. But, you know, I do about once a week a 24-hour fast. And those are the proactive, just simple things you can do. It's hard at first, but then, you know, my 24-hour fast, I can do them without even thinking about it. I have to remind myself that I'm hungry. So once you get into that process, I think what you did was start eating a lot more walnuts, almonds, avocados, fish, eggs, and cut out all the bad stuff, potatoes, processed food, fast food. It works so well. It's just incredible, the change.
Speaking of that point, I did start eating a lot more nuts, and some nuts have carbs, but I mentioned that one of my family members developed a tree nut allergy. That happened at the time that I was transitioning over to low carb. I had just developed a huge love of macadamia nuts. Oh gosh, love them and miss them, but we're not going to have them around the house anymore. Ann Sampson, is there a way to assist BJJ in getting the LP information out to physicians and patients? I'm trying with my immediate family and friends, but no earth-shaking results. I've got several families, several patients. Their families have this challenge. I've got a world-class, I've got a couple of world-class levels, 500, 700. Joe Riley appeared on the station once, and his, I think, got actually over 1,000 at one point. Once you get over 500, you get calcification of the aortic valve. I'm really going down bunny holes. Actually, James and I will be talking with BJJ. We'd love to have him come on the channel and talk a little bit about what he's doing, Ann. So thanks for asking. Kay King, my cousin's husband just lost a relative from the vaccine. It's very interesting. Again, you hear that and your question is, okay, what happened? Was it an anaphylaxis that wasn't managed? Was there something else going on? Any other, we're not going to be able to cover all of these today. There's just too many really good comments. I apologize. James, have you seen any that you think we need to pull up?
No, just no, nothing that's jumps out. Just some debating back and forth. That's good and healthy, and happy to do so. And Skunk Ape always bringing up great comments. He says, well, he tested positive even though he had no symptoms. But so he thinks it was the vodka and smoking and the mixture of Sam's Club hand sanitizer that's keeping him alive and healthy. So we always like the entertaining comments. So none of those. I know we're up against the clock, but great comments. I think people back and forth are reading those comments. And
One final comment before we go. This is from Felix. Felix has actually shared his story on the channel. He came to us. He's a businessman. He's a very successful businessman, and came to us and said, "You know what? I for a long time worked on my business and said I was going to take care of my health afterwards. I should have done the other way around." Well, he did a lot of great work. He started working with us. Had already started doing some great work before he got started with us. Felix is one of those folks that actually made a major reversal in his own kidney disease. It was very, very interesting and a great share, Felix. I appreciate your having shared that on the channel. His question is thoughts on COVID issues. This is heart inflammation. So I think Felix is referring to the issues with long haul COVID, and that's a big issue. I am not an expert at any point. I'm not that well informed yet on COVID long haulers. There is some information that's starting to come out, but I think it's still going to be a while before that develops. I'm very concerned, by the way, in terms of this issue, cardiovascular inflammation and COVID long haul. Anything else before we go, James?
No, I don't think so. I appreciate all the comments. Sorry we can't get to everything. We do appreciate the back and forth, the challenges, the likes, the good comments. Subscribe to Dr. Brewer's channel. We need that. We'd like that. If you can, give us some, everyone, if they would be so kind, give us some likes or some dislikes, because that drives traffic to and fro. And so if you'll do that, we would appreciate it. We look forward to next week.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, James.
All right, thank you, guys. Good show, Ford. I think. We had any technical issues, so that was good.